Welcome, friends. Thank you so much to Justin and all the team for sharing those amazing photos with us from Friends Changemaker Weekend. And thanks to everyone who was part of that amazing event. We are so happy that you are here with us tonight for our program this evening. And I want to invite us to just take a deep breath together. After a long day, I'm sure for all of us, perhaps a busy day wherever you are. Thank you for introducing yourselves in the chat. It's wonderful to see people joining from all across the country. As always, we have a full agenda for our call today, and we will have an agenda that's divided basically into two parts. I should have said at the beginning, I'm Bridget Moix, General Secretary of FCNL, introduce myself. So glad to be here with you. And our agenda tonight will be divided into two parts. First, we will have some policy updates. We want to know what's happening with Congress right now. They're just back from break. And also, we want to talk about the decision that the Supreme Court recently made that is already having major impacts on voting rights. So we will hear policy updates from FCNL lobbyists on these issues and hear what this means for our advocacy going forward. The second half of our program will be focused on preparing ourselves for the midterms. As you know, these are very important elections coming up. There's a lot going on, and we want to talk about what we can do as the FCNL network to engage candidates and advance the issues we care about throughout this election cycle. I want to make a reminder that we are a nonpartisan organization. We do have a C4 and a C3, so we can work politically, of course, but we remain nonpartisan. But we're going to do everything we can to get out the vote and build relationships with candidates to build the world that we seek. Before we dive into the conversation, I just want to share a few tech reminders, as we always do at the start of our calls. At this point, we have just over 120 people on the line. Wonderful to have you all here with us. Live captioning should be available to all if you're joining on the computer or by tablet, so please look for that if you need it. And so that we can all focus on the conversation and listen together, we will be closing the chat box for everyone after we've done this introduction. You can still chat to us, to the FCNL panelists and hosts, if you need help or have questions. We have reviewed the many questions that folks have already shared ahead of this call, and we will be doing our best to answer a number of them, as many as we can throughout the program. And if you still have questions that you haven't sent, please do use the Q&A box. That's different than the chat box, the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Or you can always email us with your questions to lobby@fcnl.org. So let's dive into the conversation tonight about elections, voting rights, what Congress is up to. We'll start with policy updates, and I want to bring in Amelia Keegan, FCNL's Associate General Secretary for Policy and Advocacy, who I have to say has just come back from a 250-mile run that she did, because she is not only a persistent advocate, she's an incredible runner. And she has come back just as Congress has also come back from recess. And Amelia, we would love to hear, in the midst of all that's going on, a war with Iran that's persisting, reconciliation and appropriations that are coming up, what do we need to know about the moment that we're in for the policies that we care about and the elections that are coming up?
Yeah, thank you, Bridget, and thank you all for joining us this evening. It's always good to see all of your names in the chat and to share this time together when so much is happening. So we have funding for the Department of Homeland Security, namely ICE and CBP, and the mass deportation campaign is back on the agenda as Republicans in Congress right now, as you've probably seen, are trying to fast track a bill to fund ICE and CBP for 3 years without any additional accountability measures or guardrails. We have appropriations season really ramping up and with deep funding cuts threatening many of our priorities. And then the war in Iran continues, right? But at FCNL, of course, we are not slowing down. Just last month, many of you participated. We had nearly 300 of you in Washington for our first ever intergenerational lobby conference, French Changemaker Weekend. Saw some of those pictures as we were coming into the call, where we urged Congress to oppose any additional funding for the war in Iran. And we had what I think is probably a record number of member level meetings. And what a time to be making our voices heard on Capitol Hill about the Iran war. Meanwhile, we are just over 6 months away from the 2026 midterm elections, which we know, right? That's going to be highly contested, and it will determine how the next Congress addresses both our issues and the last 2 years of the Trump administration. So at the same time that we're advocating about these immediate issues right before Congress, that Congress is debating and considering, this is also a time that we need to be simultaneously focused on accountability and laying the groundwork for the 120th Congress and our future advocacy. Because now is election season, right? Primaries are underway. We have all these efforts to redraw congressional maps, new gerrymandering. We have court rulings, confusing changes in different places all around the country. It's very high stakes, very contested, and a very polarizing time. But our job really is to stay grounded and think about how do we cut through the noise to take effective action on the issues that we care about, right? We stay focused on building power at the local level, developing those relationships with policymakers, and through our advocacy, really strengthen our democracy. And this is such an important time to be getting in front of candidates to shape the agenda of the next Congress. Candidates really need to be hearing from voters as they campaign, right? Accountability through relationships and the ballot box. So we're going to have, probably in this election year, a lot of new members in the next Congress. And getting in front of candidates early can pay such dividends later on. This sort of early relationship building sets us up for more influence come January and throughout the next Congress. Right. And as Bridget said earlier on, this isn't about partisan politics, right? FCNL, we're nonpartisan. We don't support or oppose specific candidates. We are not trying to get one party in office or out of office. It is about advancing a peace and justice agenda. We are focused on our policy priorities. And this is about democracy in action and ensuring that all of our communities have a voice and representation in Congress. It's about reaching across the political divide to talk with candidates who we might disagree with. But accountability advocacy is much more effective when there's a relationship, right? We know that how important it is for lawmakers to be hearing us when there's a relationship there. So we'll hear more about this and some of the ways that you can get involved. But that's just a basic overview of what's happening in Congress and kind of some of our approach and interest in really focusing on the candidate engagement at this time.
Thank you so much, Amelia. There is so much going on, and I'm really excited later in the call to dig into this candidate engagement and talk about some practical ways that we can do that. But I actually want to turn to Jose Santos Moreno, our Director for Justice Reform, because we have also just had a major decision by the Supreme Court that is making voting rights really undermining voting rights and making these elections even more complicated, creating confusion and marginalizing people again. And Jose, thank you so much for joining us. I know you got a lot going on at home. We really appreciate you being here. And I was reflecting a lot on the long history that FCNL has of lobbying for voting rights, going back to opposing the poll tax when the organization was first started and supporting, of course, the Voting Rights Act in 1965. this decision by the Supreme Court is really devastating for that act and the progress since it. And it really guts critical legislation that has played a really important role in ensuring fairer representation for Black, Latino, Native American, Asian, other communities. And we care deeply about these issues for many reasons. And one of them is that this is a way that we can live into our commitment on becoming more of an anti-racism, anti-bias, justice, equity, and diversity and integrity focused organization. And we have a whole statement and body of work committed to that work that really challenges us to make sure that when things like this happen, we are challenging the laws and systems and the mindsets, policies, and practices that lead to institutionalized racism. So help us make sense of what has just happened in this Supreme Court decision, what it means for our work, for voting rights for people, and for the commitments that we have.
Thanks so much, Bridget. I would first direct you to our website. I drafted a summary of how we got here. And in short, it really does start with a combination of the harmful and damaging effects of money in politics, um, money corrupting the system, the racism that we've never gotten over as a country, the promise that we've never lived up to, and a number of individuals who want to centralize as much power as possible by making the pie, the voters, as small and manageable as possible so that they have to answer to less and less people, less real people with real lived lives and real problems. So let me give you a little bit of some history from the courts that got us to the Louisiana v. Calais decision of last week. It started with the 2013 Shelby v. Holder decision that struck down the pre-clearance formula. Simply put, any jurisdiction, mainly the South, some jurisdictions like in New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, that had a history of racist gerrymandering, had to clear, that's why it's called the pre-clearance formula, their election laws and their maps, either through the Department of Justice or a federal court in DC, before being put into place. Then we had the 2019 Rucho v. Common Cause decision, which essentially made it completely legal to gerrymander for partisan gain. So if you're saying, I'm going to put as many Democrats as possible into this area of this district and then dilute them with a lot more Republicans so that they have effectively, so a whole area that might have been Democratic has no representation, is completely legal. That's okay under the Supreme Court. And that really set the stage for what we saw in Louisiana v. Calais about 10 days ago. The Calais decision essentially finishes dismantling the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It takes Section 2 and eliminates the ability to remedy racial discrimination in district maps. Especially pernicious is that the ruling allows, and this is something that I just learned, which is wild to me. Because of the way that the decision was worded, it allows for uh, people to take districts that are largely made of voters of color and call them racist. So basically, white people now have a claim to say that they are victims of racism with largely minority districts. So that's another terrible part of this decision by the Supreme Court. After this decision, we've been seeing state legislatures rushing to begin mid-decade redistricting in response to this case. You saw it with Representative Steve Cohen. He is Jewish, but he does represent a largely minority district. Before him, his predecessor was a black man. There are maps attempted to be redrawn in, I believe, North Carolina, Alabama, and they're looking at other states as well. And I should also state that they're going to state that this is for partisan gain. They're just trying to put these Democrats into this Republican district to dilute their power. But it just so happens that in these areas, the overwhelming majority of Black people vote Democratic. And since you can't prove that intent, you don't have a case. So that makes this very bad for people of color who at one point did have some voice in Congress and now effectively might have none. What do you need to know? It looks bleak, yes, but there's an unprecedented energy that's meeting the unprecedented corruption and flaws in our system. I feel we're moving away from campaigns, runoff, dark money ads, and bumper stickers to real issues. Government is not meeting people's needs. And I'll say that again. Government is not meeting people's needs. Democrats and Republicans are not happy. People are starting to pay attention. I'll add here, um, unfortunately, the makeup of Congress is not promising for this really great piece of legislation, but I'll add that Senator Durbin has a great piece of legislation in S 2325, which is the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which would reinvigorate the Voting Rights Act and essentially put in sort of the sections that were eliminated by this court. Um, GOTV or Get Out the Vote is even more important in engaging with candidates, especially before Election Day. Many states have vote by mail, early voting, and you should encourage people to take advantage of this. Voting early is fantastic, and it reduces the strain on the system the day of. Election Day is one day, and court cases are not one day. So I encourage you to get out the vote early and encourage others to get out the vote early as well. Local organizing is key around candidate raising issues with candidates. So again, it's not just dark money ads and bumper stickers, but real actual um, mad issues of consequence and really important issues, and to build power. Um, they should have a position on gerrymandering, on money in politics, on voting rights. This is an issue that affects everything. If you care about the environment, if you care about our enormous Pentagon, nuclear weapons, all of it is affected by money in politics and voting rights. And with that, thank you so much for everything that you do, and I'll pass it back to Bridget.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you so much. And it does feel like we just took a huge step backwards. But I also really appreciate what you said about the level of organizing that we're starting to see in response to this. And we'll talk about some opportunities later, and we're going to dive into candidate engagement in a minute. But it is hard in these moments where decades of struggle for civil and political rights feel like they're getting overwhelmed by this resurgence of white supremacy in politics, is what I want to call it. And I would love to get your advice for all of us, for advocates. How do we stay hopeful in these moments? How do we keep advancing that multiracial democracy that we all believe in? Um, Give us some words of inspiration before we let you go.
Yeah, I often think about the fact that for marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Alabama to demand voting rights, John Lewis's skull was cracked. These aren't wins that came easily, and oftentimes with violence. And I think about my mother, who emigrated to this country from the Dominican Republic just 2 years following the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, affording her the right to vote. These hard-won rights are technically still recent. It feels like a long time ago, but it really was not. It almost feels like it almost feels like it just happened. Um, and I'll just remind you that the high ideals that the U.S. loves to brag about at home and abroad must be realized by us every single day. And I believe we and you can do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose. Thank you really for joining us and sharing all this. As Jose said, Congress is not moving legislation right now on voting rights or electoral reform, But this is an issue that our network cares deeply about, that's critically important. And so we wanted to spend a little time trying to make sense of it. I want to make sure to commend again to you all Jose's blog, which has been put in the chat, the link for that. It is really helpful. And also note that there are opportunities. We participate in a lot of democracy focused networks, and there are a number of opportunities and trainings coming up that we want to flag for you. We're part of a network called Faiths United to Save Democracy that trains poll chaplains and peacekeepers for the polls, and they're having a training, turnoutsunday.org. You can find information for those trainings. I've been a poll chaplain. And the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights has a call to action for July for Good Trouble Lives On, a weekend of action in July 17th to 19th. So we'll share some of this information in the chat and encourage you to get involved in lots of different ways with these networks and opportunities. And there's another one I just saw was flagged, All Roads Lead to the South by the Black Power War Room. So we'll include all these resources for you. Don't worry, and they're going in the chat now. Thank you so much. We might have time. We're running a little behind, but I want to see if there are any questions immediately for Amelia and Jose right now before we move on. So just to see if there are any questions that we've received or that people have right now to send to us. Oh, I see one here. A question from participant Robert and Gloria Horbe. We're in Republican Van Drew's district. What can we do other than our weekly calls to his office? That's a question maybe for Amelia. Amelia, do you want to jump back on and we'll take that question?
Sure, yeah, and I see that Stephen, I think, answered a little bit that in the Q&A box, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot to do besides just calling. So calling is great, but then also working with others in your community to schedule lobby visits, to meet with the office, and finding out, especially in this campaign season, there a lot of times members are out and about. They might be at parades, they're at local community events, they might be doing town halls. So any opportunity to get in front of your member of Congress and speak to them. There's also efforts to, do a letter writing campaign. Get 10 of your friends to get together and write letters, and then you can go and drop that off at the office or coordinate a time to do that in conjunction with a lobby visit. You can write letters to the editor. We have a lot of resources on our website, but there are a lot of things to do to continue to raise the issue so that also you are seen by the office as someone who is following, paying attention, and doing all different a variety of efforts to raise awareness with other community members and bring other community members in and really build and show that there's a broad constituency who cares about these things.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. I don't see any other urgent questions, but I'm sure more will come later in the call. So thank you, Amelia. Thank you, Jose. And we will come back to more questions later if we missed any right now. And want to move into the second part of our program in a minute on engaging candidates and talk to some special guests who are going to share some ways that they've done that. But before we do that, we have a special announcement from our head of advancement, Stephen Donahoe, who's just joined us. Stephen, what's happening? Tell us.
Hi, Bridget, and hi, many friends that we've known for many years and new folks as well. The exciting news is that between now and June 30th, every gift you make to FCNL will be matched. We have a group of donors who have stepped up to provide matching funds totaling $267,000. So every gift up until we get to 267 will be matched. And this is a really important moment in our work. As you know, this has been a really difficult time in our advocacy, as everybody here knows. And we've had to dig deep and invest in some of these resources that we've talked about already. Invest in our lobbying, invest in grassroots training across the country. and we need your partnership. Many of you have already donated this year, which is fabulous, and we're so grateful. If you're able to make an extra gift this fiscal year, that would be tremendously helpful. You can give online at fcnl.org/donate. And it's just been put in the chat. I'll make the link live. So hopefully, there you go. You can just click on it to donate now. And this is a really important step to end the fiscal year strong so that we can start the next fiscal year when we know we're going to get a new Congress. We're going to have a lot of opportunities and challenges. And we're struggling. We need your support in our fundraising. Many of you have been very generous, and we still are behind. So we would really love for folks to click that donate button now and donate what you can to support this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you to all and to all the fundraising team. Enormous thanks to the donors who are making this match campaign possible and to all the folks who are donating to us and supporting our work throughout the year. And as Stephen said, now this is a wonderful opportunity to increase the impact of your gift. So please do consider making a gift, maybe even before the end of this call. That would be exciting if we get some gifts in even before this call is over. So thank you so much, Stephen. Let's dive in now to the second part of our program. And for this, I'm going to turn this over to Amelia to lead us through some conversations with some special guests. Amelia, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Bridget. So we talked about the importance of engaging candidates, right? About how it's incredibly valuable to get in front of candidates, to do it early. And we recommend reaching out to, all candidates who are running or the major candidates who are running, to really develop those relationships and get those priority issues in front of them, introduce them to FCNL. It's also important to work to get candidates that you think are going to be the best for your community into office, the ones who are going to support the issues that you care about. And so that is another piece of it that you should be kind of engaging in for those that whichever candidates that you think are going to be best for your community. But we want to hear from some advocates who have had some great experiences and to share some advice on how you engage with candidates. So first, we're going to bring on longtime FCNL advocates, Sarah and Tom Pattison. And Sarah and Tom, thank you so much for joining us. Wondering if you could talk just a little bit about the importance of connecting with candidates early. How have you done this in the past? Do you have any tools or tactics that you can share that have been successful for building relationships with candidates? How should oftentimes we only just get a very brief minute or two with a candidate. How should folks be prepared for an elevator pitch when you only have a couple minutes or a few words with a candidate? How can you meet and get in front of candidates? How do you actually build those relationships? And any examples of how early candidate engagement has helped your legislative advocacy be more effective. So I threw a lot out there, but would just love for you to share some of your advice and experiences.
Thank you, Amelia. So Tom and I first came to FCNL in 2006 when Tom's mom, Betty Pattison, was remembered at the annual meeting in DC. Excuse me. I didn't know who my congressman was, and I thought a lobbyist was a slick corporate salesman. But FCNL trained us in lobbying, and we went on our first congressional visits. And the main point I learned was to speak from the heart. There are usually several talking points at a meeting, and we were able to choose to express issues that we really care about, like preventing nuclear war. Another tool for success is built into lobbying with FCNL. We are all asking for all of us together to build a better world. Think about it. The congressperson is so often besieged with requests which would help specific businesses or sectors or individuals. When you're talking about the world we seek, you're bringing a breath of fresh air to help our elected representative remember why they chose public service. You're not bothering them. You're giving them the input they need to make the best decisions. Now, relationships are so important because sometimes district lines come and go, and eventually they may come back. Years ago, I visited the office of my then Congressman Mike Thompson and noticed that he had a jar of Jelly Belly jelly beans on his desk. Well, I knew that the Jelly Belly factory in Vacaville was not in our district, but Mike said that they used to be. And so they keep sending him Jelly Bellies because you never know what'll happen, and they want to keep that relationship. So actually, Tom and I are actually Jelly Bellies because we were then drawn out of Mike's district into John Garamendi's district, and then redrawn into Mike's district where we are currently. And then next month in our primary, we're going to vote for John Garamendi again. So keep those Jelly Belly relationships active. But one thing John Garamendi always says is that we advocates are the experts on our issues. He can't know all the details of our important issues, so he relies on us. Go Jelly Bellies. So after years of providing reliable information to my congressman, I'm deeply privileged when on occasion Mike's staff person asks me for something. Now, I don't mean a vote or a donation. Once he wanted a phone number, which he knew I had, or he wanted me to bring a group to an event, or then he asked my advice on a thorny issue. It's very heartwarming knowing that I'm helping my congressman. And don't ignore staff. They are the ones you deal with by email or phone or in person at events.
Amelia asked for ideas for an elevator pitch, but sometimes the pitch is only a few seconds long. Years ago, Sarah and I attended a holiday party at Congressman John Garamendi's house. The guests were mostly local leaders, people focused on schools, cities, counties, farming, and ranching. As each guest walked in, John greeted them personally. Sarah said, "Thank you for inviting us." I said, "What about those B-61 atomic bombs that are housed in Turkey?" A few minutes later, Garamendi gathered everybody around the fireplace, and what did he start talking about? B-61 atomic bombs in Turkey. Because that issue mattered to him, because he's had a long history of concern about nuclear weapons. And I knew he served on the Armed Services Committee, and we had met him many times over the year, including hosting him at our home. I knew he cared about larger global issues, even in a room full of people focused on local concerns. That leads to another lesson. Learn the candidate's story. Mike Thompson is a Vietnam veteran. He understands that war is not the answer because he's seen it firsthand. When you know somebody's background, you can frame the issues in the way that connects to them personally. People listen differently when the issue connects to their own life experience. Now, right now, because of California's redistricting, we also have a new open congressional seat. One of the candidates is Dr. Richard Pan. Many people know Dr. Pan because he championed childhood vaccines in California. When I met him many years ago at a physician's meeting, when he arrived, he had a lot of CHP officers because of all the serious threats to his life because of his vaccine work. To me, that showed courage. He accepted personal risk in the defense of public health. So I contacted his campaign, and we met for over 90 minutes, and we developed a very strong personal relationship. We worked with another advocacy group to endorse him in the primary, and it's now on their website. That's something that FCNL doesn't do, but there's other groups with PAC that can support related clauses. Healthcare is clearly Dr. Pan's strongest area, but because of the early support from me, I know when I will meet him later as part of an FCNL delegation, he will listen to us carefully on foreign policy issues as well. He will remember we showed up early. Meeting candidates early, especially in the primaries, has a lasting impact. It's a little bit like prevention in medicine. Early relationships matter.
Now, we're on an FCNL advocacy team, so we have a group to coordinate our outreach on FCNL's issues. So join a team. to get the training and support in visiting local offices. Candidates always say that early support is crucial. And frankly, the best tool to connect with the candidate early is to make a donation to their campaign. Now, that is not something FCNL does, but once you have that relationship, you can talk about FCNL issues. You can go to fundraising events where you can meet the candidate. Sometimes there are high price tags, but we just went to an event where the ticket price was $65 and that included dinner. So if you work with another organization that endorses candidates, work to get your candidate endorsed. For issues on preventing nuclear war, we use the Council for a Livable World. For peace in the Middle East, we use J Street. If your key issues are climate change or the environment or healthcare or any other FCNL issue, you can likely find an advocacy organization with a PAC which will advance that shared issue. And FCNL staff can direct you to our partner organizations.
So don't wait until after November election to reach out. If your candidate loses in either primary or the general election, there'll be a good chance to run again, and you'll already have established a relationship. Congress people are not abstractions. They are people. We once spent a week on a bus tour with a congressional delegation to Israel and Palestine, including daily breakfasts with Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Part of lobbying is recognizing that there's inner light in every person we meet. This work has been one of the most meaningful experiences in our lives.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Wow. Sarah and Tom, just appreciate all your wisdom and sharing your advice and experiences. That was just wonderful to hear. I am now going to turn it over. We have another special guest and bring in another perspective on engaging candidates as well as how anti-democratic efforts are factoring into this work. So I'm really excited to be joined by Taylor Trevino. Taylor served as an FCNL Advocacy Corps organizer in Texas from 2022 to 2023, and she's currently the Voting Rights Senior Manager at the Texas Civil Rights Project. Taylor, thank you so much for joining us. We talked earlier about the impact of the Supreme Court's decision on voting rights. Of course, these anti-democratic efforts are not new to you and Texans. Can you share a little bit about the state of play in Texas and what the response has been?
Yeah, and so happy to be here with y'all. Always love getting to join my FCNL family again. But yeah, all of these things are certainly not new to us here in Texas, unfortunately. A not so fun fact is that our maps that are drawn after every census cycle have been challenged every decade since the passage of the Voting Rights Act because of their, just constant history of, diluting voters of color. Um, Texas is also one of the hardest states to vote in. We have, voter ID laws, strict mail-in ballot requirements, no online voter registration, or all kinds of nice things like that. Um, and last year, of course, we saw the mid-decade redistricting kick off here in Texas when the administration asked for a few extra seats. So yeah, we've been working on this for a while. As far as the impact of the Cali decision, thankfully our primary was in March, and we actually have runoffs starting just next week. So hopefully, like fingers crossed, everything is fine for this November in terms of impact on our congressional maps. But I am already bracing for our next legislative session, which starts in January, because I'm sure they will, go again at the congressional maps, but also our state House and state Senate maps. Um, and locally as well. I think it's just a matter of time until we hear more calls for redistricting. Our county commissioners maps is something that we've seen a lot over the past few years already. And so I feel like this is just giving people the go ahead to keep diluting voters of color and gerrymandering to try and preserve some power. Um, but of course, we are already organizing and just rallying and doing what we can to educate voters, and also just sound the alarm so that we can really begin that sustained action that's going to be needed for I think what some people are already kind of calling like the next civil rights movement, civil rights 2.0, because this is going to be a long fight. So whether it's things like testifying at upcoming legislative sessions or other redistricting hearings, fighting back locally, or I think also importantly, fighting for the good things, pro-democracy reforms and initiatives, whether it's independent redistricting commissions or state voting rights acts. We got to push for one for the first time during our legislative session last year here in Texas. And this is something that is largely supported by the Legal Defense Fund, so shout out to them. But we've seen these passed in a few states already, more than a few actually. So really excited to keep pushing for that next year and trying to do as much as we can to protect voting rights.
Great, thank you. Can you talk a little bit, about have these efforts changed how constituents engage with candidates for office, and what are some things that you found to be effective?
Yeah, I think, still new in a way with kind of understanding the impact of this and everything. And as I mentioned, being loud and proud about the need to protect our democracy is not new to us in Texas, but I think this really just solidifies the need to make it front and center, and make it, people's number one priority. Usually voting stuff isn't like the shiniest, most, eye-catching type of platform item, but I think it really needs to be because without fair representation and a seat at the table, we're not going to get anywhere with the actual policy reforms that we want. So yeah, like I said, making it front and center, fighting for these proactive policies, and really trying to protect against some of the backsliding that we are seeing, for example, in Texas that we have, already seen over the past several years.
The final question for you, we have a lot of folks listening and wondering how to engage candidates that they might disagree with on many issues. And I'm sure that's come up with for you in a state like Texas. What tips do you have for people who are in those situations?
Yeah. I was thinking about this earlier and thinking back to my advocacy core days when I was paired up with the other another organizer from Tennessee, and I felt like we were in this club of like, it might be impossible to pass our bill this time, but we're going to keep strategizing and keep figuring out what we can do to make an impact. Um, so as I mentioned, like voting isn't normally the shiniest stuff, but I think it can also be a good entry point because it normally isn't very controversial. And that's typical days. Don't hold me to that now, but I think it can be a good entry point. Especially if you have, stickier subjects that you may want to get into with your candidates or elected officials later on. But also because people across the political aisle depend on the electoral system to, get into office. So at a certain point, it does impact every candidate. And I think that can be a good way to um, really relate it to things that they do care about, which was my second point too, which the Pattisons mentioned as well. I think it can be really important to phrase your issue and your priorities in terms of those of the person that you're trying to get on your side. There's different ways of looking at different issues. And so whether, you're able to look into their background, maybe past career areas that, are priorities for them, or if there's someone who, always responds to the financial argument, I think there's ways to put things, in their terms while also sticking to our values. Um, and then one other thing, kind of similarly, is relating the issue to their constituency or their anticipated voter base. There was an example of this, which I don't know how we're doing on time, but we had basically a state version of the SAVE Act, the Proof of Citizenship Bill, last session, which we were able to beat back somehow. It was one of their priority bills, but I think it's just a bad bill, bad policy idea. And so when you're able to, communicate to everyone, it's not just impacting voters of color or college students or young voters, but also rural voters and older voters and disabled voters. Like when you really make the impact clear to the person that you're speaking with, I think that can be effective. So, yeah.
Great, thank you, Taylor. Very helpful advice. And yes, we were certainly tracking the SAVE Act as that was potentially moving. So just grateful for all of your work. with FCNL and all your work in Texas and just your advocacy, your leadership. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you for joining us tonight. I think we have a few minutes for Q&A, and so want to open that up if folks have questions for the Pattisons or for Taylor. Want to give folks an opportunity there. Let's see. I see one here from Jeannie, my member of Congress from Massachusetts, uh, is a strong Zionist. I participated in standouts outside his office, but it didn't, my schedule didn't allow me to continue this advocacy. I'm involved. With standouts in our town center every other Saturday. How can I develop a relationship with my representative when he makes me so angry due to his strong support for Israel despite the ongoing genocide? So I wonder maybe if for folks this we kind of got to that for folks who are just really frustrated maybe by some of the stances of their members of Congress. Do you have any advice or tips of how to build that relationship? I don't know, Taylor, maybe we'll pass it to you, and then if the Pattersons want to come back on camera and if they have any advice there too.
Yeah, I was going to say this might be a good one for them. I mean, I certainly understand being constantly frustrated with your representatives because of their opinions. Um,
Well, I'll chime in
yeah.
that we actually have that same situation here. And actually, the office is not really, the congressperson's office is not really responsive to the pressure of people outside. They meet with FCNL because they actually call us in to, so that's why we don't stand outside, because we're able to meet with them. So,
I think it's a little bit also seeing the inner light in everybody, and then there's you're not going to agree with 100% with any organization. So I think it's that nonpartisan part that FCNL emphasizes that allows you to maybe find the things that you can agree on and then move that forward.
and
it's tough though.
Yeah,
it's very tough. We're lucky in California.
But it seems like the FCNL way would be more like finding something that you can work with them so that you can actually get into the office as opposed to being outside.
Yeah, and I can just share an example where there was one member of Congress that we were working with and very diametrically opposed on some of the issues that we were working on. We were trying to prevent cuts to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And that, like every proposal, they were just out there front trying to cut SNAP. And but we developed a relationship with the office. So we kept going in and we kind of were like, okay, we know where we each are on this issue. We know we're not going to be able to convince each other on that, but we continue to develop the relationship. And at one point, another issue came up around international food aid. And on that issue, because we had the relationship, that office said, actually, I think we're aligned on that. And they worked to actually get that through and try and get that through. So it was one instance where, again, trying to find, okay, we know we don't agree on this. We think on this other issue, we might be able to, and it was because we had the relationship that we were able to continue the conversation and find areas where we might be able to partner and agree. But it is very hard, especially when there are some issues that are just so emotionally central to a lot of the of what we care about. But yeah, so I hope that might be another example of sometimes where we've still been able to find common ground, and we do that at FCNL with so many offices where we really have issues on we don't agree on this issue, but on that issue we're partnering and they're a lead champion. And that's one of the benefits of working for a multi-issue organization that works on so many different issues, that usually we can sometimes find something that we might be able to make some progress or work together on. Great. Okay. Let me see if there are any other questions here. It looks like most of them have been answered. And Jose, I encourage folks to go into the Q&A piece and see that Jose has answered a lot of the different questions that have come up here around redistricting. And I see one here about given what's going on in Alabama, early voting is going, but emergency stopping by the governor, and therefore people who voted are thrown out. Does one really want to vote early? And Jose says, not, yeah, he's not going to give specific advice. There are a lot of different elections. One of the things that I have heard is that if you do vote early and it is challenged, there is, or it's thrown out, there's time then for you to challenge. You find out that your vote wasn't, you might find out that your vote wasn't counted, or you have some time to then try and push back or challenge what has happened. So that is one thing that I have heard. But again, defer to Jose, who is our expert in that area. Um, and then another question is building relationships with local officials helpful? Go for it.
I'll go for that. We heard another researcher researching nuclear weapons issues. And the thing is, people who run for local offices then move up to higher offices eventually. And that basically what you're doing when you advocate for an issue at the local level is you're just creating the culture around that issue.
We got the state of California to put an initiative in to limit nuclear weapons. That was actually locally from our local representatives and got it all the way through to the passed and signed by the governor, or maybe not signed because it was
No. It's just our state legislature. But we last Hiroshima Day, we celebrated every level of our government, city, county, state senate, state assembly, and Congress, and Senate.
We gave them placards. We gave them placards saying they were champions.
Having taken some action on preventing nuclear war. So,
and the other thing we've done, I didn't have time, but we also have met a lot of other candidates for primary candidates. So we're building relationships, with the top candidates, but we're also looking at other candidates or candidates in other districts besides Dr. Pan. So it's really actually a time where you can get 30 to 60 minutes with a candidate when they're running for in a primary, where you'd have a lot more trouble getting that time once they're elected.
Right.
So it's an opportunity, to build a relationship. And Bush and his George, he lost his first congressional election. If you build a relationship with him, he might have some influence as a president. Who knows?
Thank you. Taylor, you work with, local official, at the different levels. Do you want to add in there?
Yeah, my first thought was depending on where you live, you may have a much better chance at, building a good relationship or advancing local policy than with state or federal. So definitely wouldn't knock it. And also, the smaller the jurisdiction, the fewer constituents they have. So the higher chance you may have at getting some face time with them and getting them to pay attention to your issue. I had another thought, but it just left me. Oh, another thing is that I don't know how much this may vary by state, but in Texas, all of our municipal and school board elections are nonpartisan. So while obviously people have their own policies and everything, that might help, depending on, if you're representing an FCNL or a Texas Civil Rights Project, could help getting in the door, to kind of have that background as well.
Great. Thank you. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate you sharing your expertise, your advice, for everyone here. I will now turn it back to Bridget to close us out.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you to the Pattisons. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Amelia, for that really inspiring and practical discussion about all the different ways we can engage candidates around the elections. Really appreciate everything that people are doing and all the great tips and examples that you shared. Thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. As we said at the beginning of this call, we are just around 6 months away from these elections, and they are so, so important for our democracy, for the issues that we work on, and the relationships we can build with candidates and our legislators through these elections and far beyond are so important for building the world that we seek. So we are going to, I think there might be a slide with some next steps that we just want to summarize. There we go. Thank you, Justin. We are going to make sure, as always, that we send you a summary of everything, so you don't have to write all this down. But we wanted to just note some of the next steps that you can do as we prepare for the midterms ahead. If you are not yet part of an advocacy term, please consider joining or even starting one in your community. These are such a great way to organize together, to build community, to advance our advocacy. And they're all about sharing our relationships and engaging our candidates and community leaders. So there's a lot of work together that we can do through the advocacy teams. Do consider, if you haven't yet attended an introduction to advocacy training and that is of interest to you, we would love to get you involved in the introduction to advocacy trainings that we do very regularly, and you can find a schedule of those on our website. So please do that if you haven't, and invite others. Others who are curious or who are frustrated or who want to see change in their communities and their country. It's a great entry point. And then think about how you can also keep helping empower FCNL's work. Please do consider giving a gift to our matching gift challenge. If you haven't yet donated, please go to that link and consider doing that. We are so, so grateful, and we do need that support, as Stephen noted. And do keep utilizing the resources that we provide. We will send out a number of resources after this call. And if you go to our website, there are multiple places where you can find additional resources. We have an elections page that can give you more information and opportunities around preparing and working around the elections. We also have a civil rights page, and this is where we really try to highlight opportunities and organizations that are working to advance civil rights in ways that we don't necessarily focus on legislatively, but might be great opportunities for you to get involved. So please check out that resource page as well. And then we wanted to lift up the 2 upcoming calls and trainings. There's a Quaker call to action. If you don't know the Quaker call, please check that out. It's about building our democracy and engaging together in that. And there is the Pole Chaplain Peacekeeper training that I mentioned with Faiths United to Save Democracy. So we'll send all this out after the call on an email, but we just wanted to lift up all those opportunities. Again, thank you so, so much for all that you do for FCNL. Thank you for your support, for your advocacy, for your financial contributions, for working together in community with us to build the world that we seek. We are here not just for this moment or for the months ahead, but for the long struggle of bending the moral arc of history toward justice. And we are so glad that you are here with us to keep doing that. So thank you all very much. Have a restful night and keep on keeping on. Let's keep getting in good trouble for John Lewis. Thank you all.